Welcome. Greg Spencer is the founder of SAIR, Substance Abuse Information Resources. In this video, he discusses two examples from his own experiences as a recovering alcoholic and as a substance abuse clinician of when interventions helped people get sober. One was the result of a formal intervention, and the other involved a simple but emotional conversation between a father and his two daughters. Greg said that in both cases, men were compelled to begin what became long-term sobriety after discovering just how much their drinking was harming their children. The two cases show how powerful interventions can be in setting some people on a path to sobriety. Greg says they also demonstrate how persuasive children are in getting some parents to realize the extent to which their drinking or drugging is damaging other members of their families.
We know that you can have formal interventions done because I've done them as a counselor, as a clinician, where you get family members together, close friends, period, other people who could be influential in reaching out and trying to get somebody to do something about their alcohol or drug problem or an intervention. And you probably see how they did it on television. But I found one of the things is, and I've done some interventions, and some of them have been very successful, and other ones have been total flops and just never took, and the person never really came around. I guess that's the best way of putting it. One of the things that really, one of the problems is that you never know what that intervention is, where it's going to come from. And I'm going to share with you a couple that really made an impact on me. One of the first ones I heard was a fella who was at a meeting, and he talked about how he came to Alcoholics Anonymous and why he stopped drinking. And his story was he worked in a marble quarry as a laborer over in Vermont, in a small town in Vermont. And he had two daughters that were 11 and 13. And he also had an ex-wife who was a nurse, and they were separated. They had divorced. And the arrangements they had made with the two girls was during the week, she worked nights during the week. And while they were at school, they'd come home from school, and he'd come home from working in the mines Monday through Friday. And he would, they'd have dinner together, and he'd ask him what was going on, but he sort of kept an eye on him. And they did whatever they had to do in school, and he did what he had to do. But every night he drank, not to intoxication. He didn't get drunk or anything, but he would go down to the bar, which is right down the street, and have a couple of drinks, come back home, and they'd be doing their homework or doing whatever they had to do. And then on weekends, his wife didn't work, the nurse, and she lived separately. The two girls would go and live with her on Saturday, Sunday, and come back Sunday night. He would get on those weekends. That's when he went wild with his drinking, and he used to go out and he'd start on in the morning and go all day long. And he wasn't a good drunk. He wasn't a good guy to be around when he was drinking, because he got in a lot of trouble over the weekends. He'd get drunk, he'd get arrested, got his name in the paper several times, and everybody knew him as what he was. And the girls had an idea of how bad their father was, but they never really saw him that bad because they weren't around him on the weekends. But one day he came home from work, and the girls were there, and he said to the older one, how's everything going? And she sort of just ignored him. And she said, and he said, what's going on? She said, oh, nothing. He says, so how are things going? And she said, nothing. And the younger one, who was in school with her, said, tell Dad what happened. And he goes, what happened? What do you mean, what happened? And she's no. And the older one said, no, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. And the younger one said, and now he gets sort of shook up. what do you mean? What happened? I want to know what happened. And she says, no, it's nothing important. And the younger one says to him, if you don't tell Dad, I'm going to tell him. And all of a sudden, he said he was, beside himself. He said, what's going on? He didn't know whether somebody had attacked her or what had happened. And she says, I don't know. And the little one, the younger one, said, I'm going to tell him. Okay. And she says, I'll tell him. And she said at school today, and she says, actually, it's been going on for a little while. Kids are all making fun of me. And he said, what do you mean? He says, they're all kidding me because you're the town drunk. And every time I hear that, I get choked up, as I am right now, because he didn't realize how much his ripple effect of his drinking was now beginning to have on his daughters, who he loved dearly. And he said that was it. That was the intervention. When his daughter said, you're the town drunk. And that got him into recovery immediately. He said he stopped, and he's so glad that he didn't. He had several years of recovery. But when he told that story, it blew me away, and it blew everybody else in the room away too. We're all choked up or crying because it was such a beautiful way of the intervention happening. And I'm going to share another one. And this was a formal intervention that I did with a family, and we had a priest there, and we had a couple of friends and a wife and a sister. The sister was the one who arranged this with me to do this as a professional counselor. And we more or less, this guy worked for the power company. He was a man's man. He was one of these guys who went out and drank at the Knights of Columbus or at the American Legion Hall, and he was a tough guy, and he'd get drunk, and he had a real drinking problem, and it was progressing. So that's why they wanted to do the intervention. And he had a son, an older son, who had just gone away up to Syracuse. And meanwhile, he's sitting there, and I'm watching his. I'm not doing anything now. I had set this up, and the priest said, you always got me here for you. You know that. I've known you since high school, and and I can see he's got his body language is just. He's got his arms crossed, and he's not taking any of this in. It isn't resonating with him at all. And one of his friends said, he said, I want to read something to you. And it's from your son. It's from Mike. And Mike sent a letter down. He wanted me to just read it to you because he knew he wanted to be here, but he couldn't be. Now he's a freshman at Syracuse, as I said. And he was the apple of his father's eye, sports hero in high school and all this other stuff. And so he said, I just want to read this to you. And so, Jack, who the father said, just sort of, okay. So, and basically it was something to the effect of, Dad, I wish I could be there today because I know that people are reaching out and trying to help you do something maybe about your drinking. He says, I just have to tell you something. You've always been my hero. You've always been the person I've looked up to and I knew I could always count on. He says, but I can't say that anymore because recently every time I see you, you're drunk. And I want my old father back. Please do something about that. And he took that letter and he didn't make there was no acknowledgement, anything else. He said, that's it, I'm done. He takes the letter, puts it in his pocket. He says, I'm done. He says, I'll see Greg one time as a counselor. He says, to see what's going on. He said, I'm not going to those meetings and I'm not going into treatment or anything else. And he was a very proud guy. I'm going to stop drinking. And so we did get together. He took the letter, and probably sometime within the next week, we got together, and he said, and we just talked about it. And he said, I didn't realize it was that bad. I'll have to find something else how to do this. But I'm not going to those AA meetings. He never did go to meetings or connect with other recovering people. But he didn't, he white knuckled it probably. But about a year, or maybe it was 2 years later, I think, I was at a football game over at Bleecker Stadium. And as I was walking at halftime, I was walking up to up to the clubhouse there. And he came walking down the other way, and I hadn't seen him. And I said, Jack, how you doing? He said, I'm doing great. He said, I'm doing really fine. And I says, everything going okay? He says, yeah. And he says, I haven't had a drink. He said, every time, he said, that sometimes it looks good. He said, I'm around. I could really use one, I think. But he said, all I got to do is this. And he took out his wallet and takes the piece of paper out of his wallet. It was a letter from the son. And he says, all I have to do is read this. And he says, immediately, he says, I'm not going to drink. And that was it. So that was another type of intervention that worked. But in many cases, kids have got a tremendous power that adults don't have sometimes with their parents.